Hey everyone, it's Irene here. It is, what month is it? It is November the 18th. It's the year 2021. And today is the special topic lecture for November. I'm going to be talking about safety from a nervous system and somatic point of view. Because this is a live stream, I'm going to get a few more folks here live. I see there are 27 people thus far. So if you are here live, let me know where you are. And one little note, what we've been doing is we are starting to edit down these live streams so that for those who come after and don't want the back and forth, they can just watch the information and the content. I have got notes. We'll see if I get through the notes today. And I've got Diana helping with links as I mention things. And quick note, just a timely thing. So it's the 17th, I believe I said, 18th. Days don't matter. The 18th of November on Saturday, which is the 20th, is my monthly drop-in class. So a little bit of promo here. Once a month, we do an online, not here on YouTube, we do it on Zoom, online class. And that class is practical. That class takes you through the basics I call of nervous system health. So learning how to orient, learning how to follow impulse, how to connect to the body, to the environment. The theme for Saturday is all about tracking somatic experience, so the body experience, and also working with our intention, our attention as well. So we'll pop the link in there. Looks like Diana already did. So thank you. If you haven't joined a class, it's really one of the best ways to start some of the practical, because this work, it requires practice. It requires lifting those nervous system muscles and learning how to dive in and literally drop in to the body in a different way. And one of the things today, obviously, I'm talking about is safety from a somatic perspective. And if we did not get safety growing up, which I'm assuming if you're here, that might be the case for you, let me know in the chat. We need to get back into this body because the body holds the healing and the answers to the trauma healing that you're probably wanting. It can't just be through the mind and the thoughts. It can't just be through behavior, while those are important, and I'll get into that today. It's not everything. We need to get into the physiology and into the movements. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to see who's here, and then we'll get started. Hello from Long Island, New York, Michigan, Croatia, Denmark. We've got some alumni here. Yeah, if you're an alumni of my programs, let us know. Chicago, Oregon. Hello, Australia. It's early for you. Ontario, Kentucky. Hello, North Carolina. Thanks for sharing. You are currently homeless in North Carolina with housing finally around the corner in a few weeks. Awesome. Good to hear that. I will get into safety and this importance of having baseline safety to do this work. So I'm really glad to hear you're finding some housing that will provide more safety. Abby, hello, Mexico, Cambridge, England, Canada, Ontario, Sweden, New Zealand, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Cali, Baja, South Africa, Central New Jersey, another 21 Day alumni. Awesome. Finland, hello. Okay, so the other little note, if you're new here, thanks for being here. There are many other videos like these, many other special topic lectures. So be sure to get into those if you want to dive into more of the education. Obviously, I have way more videos with specific topics as well. We have lots of Q&As. And the other thing to know is that I have a website. And on that website, you can learn more about me and where I've come from, what my story is, what my credentials are. I have 2 degrees in science, and I have training all over the place in terms of the somatic experiencing work, working with early trauma, working with movement, neuroplasticity. It's been a full-time journey and career learning this stuff. And of course, now I'm practicing this stuff online with you. I am not in private practice anymore. I was for a long time, was teaching group workshops for a long time. They are currently on hold indefinitely due to world affairs. I hope to get back into those. And what else? Oh, in just about 2 weeks, so on the 29th of November, once a year we do what's called a Cyber Monday sale. So it's a little gimmicky, of course. There's this Black Friday thing that started in the United States. Here in Canada, we've adopted it, but it's when lots of sales happen after the US Thanksgiving, which is on, I believe, the Thursday before the Monday, which is the 29th. So once a year, we take $100 off the 21-day nervous system tune-up course. So if you don't know what that is, that's okay. This is my self-study starter course. It's in some ways the unofficial prerequisite for my longer program, Smart Body, Smart Mind. There's quite a few alumni here, I think, that are watching and learning from SBSM, Smart Body, Smart Mind. So if you haven't started the practical and you want to go deeper than a drop-in class, and I hope you do, the 21-day nervous system tune-up is the way to start. It is comprehensive, even though it's only 21 days. You can work at your own pace through it. And on the 29th of November, only for that one day Pacific time, we will be taking off $100 off of that. So when you just go to that site on the 29th, it will be discounted to $197. So just wanted to give you that little update, because sometimes people don't see these updates. So I'm wanting to just make sure that everyone knows. If you're not on my email list, please get on the email list. You will get then a reminder the night before and the day of. One note, if you use Yahoo for your email, if you can change to Gmail, I recommend it, mainly because we can't send any emails to people who have Yahoo addresses. I don't know why. We're having a lot of trouble with our email deliverability. I think it's just the state of the world. I'm not sure, but if you sign up for our emails, make sure you're getting them. And if you don't get an email once a week on Monday, then that means you're not getting them. So just send us an email to support@ireneline.com and we can help you out there. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Let me get some water into me. Haha, one person just said, yes, I haven't gotten an email in a while. We send an email out without fail every week. And when we have classes, we send you reminders. And if I'm on an online summit, I send you a reminder. So for instance, this week, we've already sent out 2 emails. We'll send out another one tomorrow to remind you of drop-in class on Saturday. So yeah, really check that out. It's unfortunate that it's just not going through. So wanting to let you know that. All right, safety. So curious, and I'm going to be a little more interactive today because I have some questions for you to think about and consider. So when you think of safety, the word safety, what might that mean? And please just give me short, succinct answers so I can read them out. And then the other question would be, do you remember a time when you weren't safe? Another question might be, so first one is, just to repeat, what is safety to you? So is it one word? Is it an idea? Is it a feeling, a thought? And then the next question would be, can you think of a time when you weren't safe? Like when you knew you were not either physically safe, emotionally safe, however it might be. And then the other question might be, how do you know you're safe? And again, these are questions that I pose to you. You can just feel into yourself and answer them. You don't have to share. You could write them down or you can share. And I'll read a few in a second because I know we're on a bit of a time delay here. safety is really something that is internal. Safety is really something that is internal. In other words, when we are under threat, when we're in a situation that is not good for us, when we are in a traumatic, abusive environment, when we're living in war. My mother grew up during the Second World War, for example, in the Philippines under martial law by the Japanese. She did not grow up in a safe environment at all. The stories are crazy, right? It would be really hard for people living in that kind of environment to take in the theoretical knowledge that I'm giving you guys today. So again, depending on where you are at, if you have an internet connection, a phone, a computer, an iPad, I know at the top of the hour, someone mentioned that they are currently homeless. So that is, that limits our safety. And yet someone is still here learning and being here, which is great. But many of us are in relatively safe environments. Now I'm going to talk about what a person should do if, yes, they have heat, they have running water, they have food, they're no longer in a real war zone, for example, but they're in a household that is maybe verbally or mentally or maybe even physically abusive. The question is can one start this work? And the answer is yes, but there are some things to be aware of. I think I did a video actually on that a little while ago. Maybe Diana, you can remember which one that was and pop it up, but I'll speak to that. So safety is a huge topic, and we think that it has to do with what's going on the outside. And while that might be very true, I'm going to speak today for those of us who have a relatively safe environment. Okay, so I just want to make that really clear. And what we're working with now is a nervous system physiology, maybe a chronic illness, maybe it's an anxiety disorder, maybe it is a relational problem, maybe it's fear of going outside because maybe one day you were in a war zone or something like that, or natural disasters, for example, can really put our system into a bit of a ringer. Having spoken with people who have been in hurricanes and lost everything, or fires in the houses, that kind of thing. But I want to speak today to those of us that are, or the situation where that the past that was adverse and abusive and wasn't safe is still living in your system now. And it's creating dis-ease. It's creating poor health. It's creating poor mental capacity, the inability to learn, the inability to meet good people, form good relationships. It's creating the inability for one to parent and raise children in a good regulated way. So we're gonna get into that. And like I said, I'm gonna be a little more back and forth with you guys today in the audience, just so that I can get some feedback. Thank you, Diana. The video is called "Can I Heal If I'm Living in a Toxic Environment?" That is on our YouTube channel. It's also probably on my blog. The overall arching answer is it depends what that toxic environment is, but for the most part, yes, but you have to often get creative. All right, so I'm going to go up to the top and just read some of your responses here. Someone said, I wasn't safe around my dad. Being able to resource by grounding in the body on a daily basis. I still have difficulty grounding at some point. Sure, so do I sometimes, depending on how stressful the day is. Someone said boarding school wasn't safe. Someone then also defined safety for them as freedom to be and express myself. Yeah, I think that's a great definition. One person said, safety was my mother, but I wasn't safe from my father. I never know if I'm safe now. Yeah, and this is a really interesting one because many people grew up in two-parent homes where one parental figure was safe, as this person is saying, and the other wasn't. And then that begs the question, what was going on in the relationship between those two parents that allowed that to happen, right? How could another parent allow another parent to be unsafe and abusive to their child, and yet it happens all the time. The reasoning for that, and I'm being very, very general here, is that typically those two adults haven't done their own healing work, and therefore they don't even know they're in a relationship that isn't healthy, that isn't mature, that is emotionally, let's say, abusive, damaging, and then that's trickling out into the capacity for their children to basically grow up and learn regulation and become mature, strong humans. So it's a very common thing. Many of us are dealing with that kind of confusion from the household. One person said safety for them is a state of connection. One person's safety means the absence of threat. Great way of putting it. Lack of conflict. Someone said still working on recognizing safety and feeling it. Yeah. If we got really solid attachment and attunement and bonding and connection and all the things that a human really needs to grow and mature, safety is usually something that is just in our system. And when I ask the question, can you think of a time when you weren't safe? The person would have to go into their memory banks. And I was playing with this myself last night. And I can think of, I wrote them down just to share. I think I wrote them down. I remember two of them. I'm not finding that note anymore. One was when I was paragliding as a 20-year-old, and I was in the air, and the weather completely rocked me, and I thought I was going to fall to my death. I wasn't safe then, and I knew it, and it was terrifying, and I had to do a lot of healing work around that fear, but also the physical damage that my body was getting in the air. So I knew in that moment, I am not safe. Like physically, I could have been very injured or died. Another time I remember not being safe was with my first husband, and we were ski touring. So back in the day, I was a big adventure athlete in the mountains. And we were ski touring, and something in my gut, and I'm telling this story for a reason, you guys, something in my gut said, something's not right. We had camped the night at a higher level on the mountain. And then the next day we were going to, it's called skin up, where you hike up with skis to do some more skiing. And something in my body said, something doesn't feel right. And my husband at the time didn't care for my intuitive gut hits. And he kind of said, well, I don't really care. I'm going anyway. You can stay here if you want to, but I'm going to go. And at that moment, I had to make a decision. What was worse? Stay at the camp by myself and get really cold because I wouldn't be moving, right? And listen to my gut, or go with him and trust that I would be fine and keep warm and stay connected to my partner. Because, you know, I'm in the middle of the wilderness, in the woods. At this point, there's no cell phone, not that a cell phone would work out there anyway. I didn't want to be isolated. Someone said safety is connection. So I chose connection over my gut sense of something bad's going to happen. So to obviously give you the full story, nothing bad happened to us, but the weather came in, it completely got foggy. And when we finally skied down, we saw that we had missed a massive avalanche with boulders the size of refrigerators. And they were literally right beside us. If you've never skied toured before, this might not make sense, but you're constantly trying to make sure that you're not in bad situations. And we essentially missed a bad situation by a very small percentage. Interestingly enough, that same weekend, there were multiple people that perished in the backcountry because of bad conditions. So I was sensing something in my body. I was connected to something that said, this isn't safe. But I went with connection instead of being alone. If I parallel this to children who are raised in an environment that is not safe, I hope you see where I'm going with this. If they know that it's unsafe and they feel it and they're frightened, many kids aren't going to leave the home, especially when they're 4 years old or 3 years old. They just can't. We do know of people and children who will run away from home, and they're successful with it. They will leave. I actually just watched a beautiful interview with the artist Jewel. She's a singer-songwriter from America, from Alaska, on Joe Rogan. We'll post it. It's so good because she talks about how she ran away from home when she started to be abused by her father. Now, she had the gumption and the knowledge to be on her own because of her upbringing. They were brought up on a homestead, so she knew how to take care of herself. Whereas I think a lot of kids don't know how to do that, and so they have to weigh out survival. If I leave this house, I'm on my own. I'm screwed. Where am I going to get food? How am I going to find shelter? How am I going to get money? Right? And so they will have to make a decision where being unsafe trumps connection, right? So that, in other words, being unsafe is what they choose because they need connection and they need to survive. And this poses a confusion in the physiology because the physiology wants to flee, but the higher brain and also their survival knows I can't flee. So that's this bind. And within that, we breed a lot of tension, a lot of stress. We can get ailments and all the things that come with that kind of dysregulation in the system. So I wanted to share those two little stories. There's one other, but I can't remember. But I also wanted to share those stories to teach something, and that if we have to think about when we were unsafe, and again, I'm really generalizing here, you guys, so you'll just have to go with me here. That typically means that we had a good enough, safe enough upbringing. The flip side, some people might be sitting here going, well, when was I safe last? So I might pose the question the other way. When were you last safe? When do you feel most safe? Or when is a time when you remember safety? And if a person has to sit and figure it out and get out their pen and paper and their calendar, and that they go, I think the last time I felt safe was when I was at that birthday party at the park with my cousins on my dad's side, because they were a safe family and I had a good time, and my mom's side wasn't there. And I remember I was at such good ease and I laughed and I was playing volleyball and I had some cake and my stomach didn't get all curdled with, the stuff that normally happens when I eat at home. I remember that was really safe because I actually could enjoy some food for it. So again, this is just a vignette, but it's actually a vignette that my teacher, Kathy Kane, who taught me a lot about early trauma and working with regulation and restoring safety to a person's system through obviously the work that I do and we do and she does and she's taught me, she would give that example. If someone has to really sit there and think about when they were safe, that usually is an indication, my friends, that the upbringing and the environment was not safe. So I wanted to give that little, paint that picture. And it might be that for some of you are thinking, oh my God, I'm doomed. I can't even think of a time when I was safe. It's okay, right? We're here to learn, and you're here now showing up, learning this information. So that's good. It shows that your higher brain and your desire to heal and get out of this sort of hue, this din of living in this unsafe field of yours is greater than, your desire is greater than the history. Make sense? Just feel that. You're here learning. I'm assuming you're here wanting to learn this. Even if you had the most abusive, horrific environment growing up and you know that you have no idea what safety even means, the fact that you're here is very, very important and very good. So be very proud that you are here. So I'm going to read some more comments and I'm going to get into another element here. And we'll get into in a moment why it's so important to focus on the body. It's not enough to just say, I'm safe, I'm safe. There are no bank robbers in my house. There's no hurricanes coming through my doors. I have food in the fridge. I'm safe. We have to understand that there's a difference between saying cognitively that we're safe and feeling it in our cells the way a baby would if they were really cared for. And that essentially, my friends, is the work that we do here. It's to teach us to how to get that yummy, good, I'm safe, I'm protected, I'm loved, and I can do whatever I want, and I will be given good instruction with boundaries that that's maybe not right, and that's it, that is right, etc. Okay, I'm gonna go into here. So Penny writes, I do not remember ever feeling safe to my core. This is why I'm on here today. Awesome. So I've just been talking to you psychically. How do you develop feeling safe? Haven't been able to move forward with EMDR due to the inability to feel safe internally. Great question, Penny. And the reason why that's so good, and Diana, you're here. Can you actually copy and paste Penny's question, Penny Jones, and send it to me via WhatsApp so I don't forget this question, because I'll use your question, Penny, to answer a bigger piece. So just send that to me over on my phone, Diana. That'd be great. Abby says, safety is the integration of my eternal being to the degree my physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional bodies know that nothing can actually kill me. Whew, that's a mouthful. That makes sense. Very, very good. Okay. Safety for me is a felt sense of calmness. Great way of putting it, Sumaya. It's this calm, and I'm going to assume you mean this sense of ease, this sense of dropping into the body, that kind of thing. Abby says, I've just learned how to feel safe. Great. Hello. I'm just going through some more of the comments here. Butterfly Talk says, my life was always chaotic and I never felt safe. I don't feel safe with my partner, although he is very safe. I feel like I can't get my system to understand we are safe now. So Butterfly Talk, this is exactly what this work is all about, that I'll be talking about. I obviously can't teach you everything in this live stream. This is education to get you understanding some of these concepts. But this is very common. If we had a past history that was unsafe and you're with a partner now that you know is safe, which awesome, that's really great. You have defied the statistics of people who grew up in really abusive environments ending up in their own abusive environment. So this is great. But yes, you're right. We have to work at a different level to restore that biological safety. Kathleen, how can we feel safe when we have to interact with toxic people at the holidays? That's a great question. So I'll answer that really off the bat right now. One, do you have to go to the holidays? Is there a reason why you have to be with those people? Would be the first question. I think we have a lot of constructs as humans that says we have to do certain things. We should go to that event. We have to send a card. We have to buy presents. We have to make turkey, even though we hate it. All these sorts of things. And so sometimes we can actually make a boundary and say, I'm not going. And as I've been doing more and more of this work, I hear more and more stories from my students and also my colleagues and friends that are like, I'm not buying into this anymore. I'm not doing this holiday thing. Why do I want to hang out with people that I have nothing in common with? And all they do is berate me and abuse me emotionally. And I don't even like the food and all these sorts of things. So that would be the first thing is there a way to just not interact with those people? Because as adults, we can make a choice to not be with other adults. Now, I understand if there are children involved and they want to see their cousins or their grandparents, then, and it's safe for them, mind you, then that's where you as the person has to ground yourself. You have to, in some ways, have compassion for why are these people toxic? What have they not healed? What have they been dealt with that is making them still like this? So this is where empathy comes in, even though it is darn hard. And then the other thing is to make sure that you have space to come down and out of that toxic environment. Book some time the next day, or make sure that you are doing lots to prepare yourself physically, mentally. Make sure you've had lots of sleep. Make sure you're exercising. Make sure you're moving the energy out of the body. Because yes, a lot of the work that people do in the year just goes down the tube the moment they have these holiday reunions and interactions. And often it doesn't offer anyone anything, in my opinion, because you just come out of it and nothing really occurs, right? So got to just make a decision. I know that's maybe a bit harsh, but as adults, we have to make a decision on who we hang out with and if they're good for us, and especially our children. And if you know that toxicity is going to your kids, let's say you have kids, why put them into that situation? Why put that into their environment? If it's because, if we use the example of grandma and grandpa want to see their grandchildren, well, if you don't want to go there because they're toxic, that's too bad. I'm being a bit harsh here, but they're adults. They don't need to see certain people. They have to work on their own stuff. Again, this is my opinion, but I think that there's a lot of things that we do as adults that we don't often stop and think, do I really want to do this? So I wanted to answer that one right now, Kathleen, because it's obviously coming up on people's minds as we go into that kind of holiday season. But yeah, it's your choice to do it or not. That's my advice to you. Someone says here, could you speak about the levels of safety and capacity to leave an unsafe environment, which may be unsafe, but it's what your system has known without having your system dysregulate again? Yeah, this is, again, part of what I'll get into in a little bit. So hold on to that thought, Jessica, and maybe Diana, if you can also send that one over to me about leaving unsafe environments. All right. And then someone had a question about teenage children. How do I help my teenage children feel safe now in a calm? I'm not sure what that final part means, Katerina, but the best way to help our children feel safe is for us to become safe in our own systems. It's for us to do the healing in our own systems, to regulate our own systems. Children, in my opinion, really shouldn't have to do this work. They should, again, teenagers are different than little ones. Kids are meant to play, they're meant to explore, they're meant to learn about their bodies, about the world, about themselves. And there's obviously situations where perhaps there was an accident, where there was a surgery, and that's why they're dysregulated. You know, they had something happen to them that had nothing to do with the parents and the upbringing of the situation. So there's that situation, which is different. So then, yes, you might need to get therapy with a kid, physical therapy, emotional therapy, whatever it might be, to help them work on that dysregulation. But if one knows, and a parent knows that they screwed up their kids because of their own inability to not understand their own bodies, and then it got transferred to the kiddos, you got to work on yourself first. It's not fair, again, in my professional and personal opinion, to put the onus on the children and tell them, you got to go work on your stuff. Here's a therapist to see. You got to do this, XYZ. Work on yourself first. I've worked with enough parents to know that when you do the work on yourself and you don't even tell the children what's happening, they start to pick up the resonance differently from you. They can tell that there is a change in your field and frequency. Your safety levels shift. It's not something that you can measure, you know, with a Apple Watch or anything like that. I guess you could measure heart rate variability, but it's not something that you can usually measure in concrete examples. But you start to see them, they start to see you differently. They feel you differently. They realize they can connect with you in a deeper way. And when that happens, that then puts more safety to their system. Okay. I'm going to get into some of my notes here. So thank you for all your comments, everyone. As I said at the top, one of the key things with restoring safety is to understand that safety is biological. It's internal. It's cellular. If I do a very quick crash course right now in nervous system physiology, if you're new here, go back and watch other videos where I go through some of the basics of what the nervous system is, especially the polyvagal theory, all these things. We'll post some links. When we come into the world as little humans, and even in utero, we are not fully adult, obviously. We're not regulated. We're not mature. We have to learn what the world is through a caregiver. Usually it's the parent. Sometimes it's a nanny. Sometimes it's an older sibling. Doesn't matter. We learn how to know ourselves through that interaction with the other person. And so part of safety, part of building safety, is building a healthy, robust, regulated autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system is what governs our sympathetic, which is our fight-flight nervous system responses, and it also governs something called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the slowing down nervous system, which governs rest, digest. It governs our freeze, and it also governs social engagement. It is a very, very complex thing, the parasympathetic. Watch the polyvagal theory videos that I've done. So we come into the world. We are a blank canvas, and we start to fill in and wire based on our interactions with our primary person. We learn what is safe and what isn't safe and what is okay and not okay by how we are interacted with. We learn how to regulate our emotions as we get older by how we are interacted with when we feel emotions. And I'm going to give a whole bunch of vignettes in a second that are less sciencey and are more practical, so you can land on some of these things. Because if you think about how much interaction and how much apprenticeship and how much connection a human needs from in utero to whenever they might be off, a kid might be off on their own, knowing how to make their own money, make their own food, figure out the way the world works. It is at least 20 years, depending on how much they were taught when they were young. As I mentioned before, that example with Jewel, the singer-songwriter, I think she left home when she was 15, maybe 14, right? But she knew how to take care of things. There's some 13-year-olds right now where they wouldn't even know how to make a sandwich because they haven't been taught, for example, right? So it's contextual. It depends on the upbringing. So when we are adults and we have this feeling of unsafety, we can start with the cognitive. So I'm going to go through these. And that might be using your eyes and your ears and something called orienting. So for those of you that know my work, you're going to hear these topics and you know what they are. For those of you who are new, you might not know what any of this is. I don't have time to go into the basics of what orienting is or the depth. But we can actively use the process of orienting to the environment to say, I'm in this home. There's no scary monsters right in front of me. Okay, maybe there's one behind me. Let me check. Nope, there's nothing there. They're not under the table. I'm going to lock the doors to make sure that I'm secure. We can use the orienting response as an adult to actually facilitate a cognitive level of safety, which can trickle in a little bit into the biology. Kids that are really, really frightened for whatever reason of, say, monsters in the closet, boogeyman under the bed, the one way to deal with that is to actually acknowledge that that's what they think is there and go check. Well, let's go under the bed and look. Let's get a flashlight. Let's go into the closet. You have to humor yourself and do that with them, as opposed to what many of us probably had. There's no such thing as a boogeyman. There's no such thing as monsters. Go to bed, turn off the lights. And then little one starts crying and trying to get into the bed with mom and dad, and they're forced back into their bedroom, and then they're terrified, right? I just gave you that little vignette. So one way, if you have kids, to make sure that they're safe is to acknowledge the fact that they really do believe there is a boogeyman in the closet and there's monsters under the bed. So it's not OCD for an adult, I don't believe, to check these things when you know that you were brought up in an unsafe environment. And as you do it, you say to yourself, I'm going to go check this door. I'm going to go check this closet. I'm going to do these things and orient to my environment. Orienting is one of the first things we teach in this work because it connects you with what's in the here and now, and you make sense of what's around you. It's about seeing, but it's also hearing, and it's a kinesthetic sense. So that's one thing. We could say that's cognitive. Now, a lot of people, I've got my book here, they journal. They might journal. They might write down, I am safe, I am safe. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with that. But can those words be felt in the body? So I might say, well, as you say those things, what do you notice in your system? And everyone's going to be different, but someone might say, as I say I'm safe, all I feel is fear. And then that's where I say, okay, well, then we know how deep that unsafety is. It means that safety is at that cellular level. And I see someone's question here. It's at that fight flight level. It's activating the somatic body. And so that's where we have to work with the body. We have to work with very specific parts of the body to disarm and give the body the clue and the cue that maybe, just maybe, it can be a little less on guard. Not completely off guard, but just a little less on guard. Okay, so cognitive, I wanted to cover that. The next thing that's important to understand with the cultivating of safety, again, is the internal sensation. So I'm going to give some more examples, again, of how we might have been brought up that gave us the cues that it's not safe. I'm just going to go to my examples here. So now this might seem like it doesn't connect, but it does. So true story. I've said this story before. It's one of my favorite stories. A long time ago, I was in a drugstore here in Vancouver during the winter, and it was super duper cold outside, like big poofy jacket, gloves, toque kind of thing, hat. And I went into the store to get something, and it was so hot in the drugstore because the heat was just blasting, and also all the chemicals, all the detergents. And so as soon as I got in, I took off my hat, I took off my gloves, I probably unbuttoned my coat because I had walked there, so I was sweating. And there was an infant in a stroller crying. And the mother was clearly not well. She was very anxious. You could tell she was, I'm not sure what, mentally something wasn't right. And she just started screaming at the baby to shut up. And I looked at the baby, and the baby was so red. And you might know why. Think about why that baby was so red and crying. The baby had its toque on still, its gloves, its booties, its jacket, and a blanket, and it was in a stroller that in itself is insulating. The baby was hot. The baby was overheating. And that mother was in her own survival physiology to the point that she couldn't attune and see, baby in distress, I need to take some of its clothes off so it can cool down. But that connection wasn't there. Of course, who knows what occurred afterwards? I don't know. I left. In those instances, I wish it was okay to just sweep in and take care of a baby that isn't yours, but you can't do this. So I left as quickly as I could, but it has lent itself to a very good teaching story. And that when you are that young, and the baby was maybe 4 months old, 6 months old, they can't regulate their own temperature because they can't take off their own clothes. They might try, but they're completely locked in ice, essentially, or in heat, because they don't have the motor skills to do it. The adult has to attune to that discomfort, listen to the discomfort, know exactly what's wrong, or try to figure out what's wrong, and then help them. That is the dance of parent interaction with an infant, and that is how they regulate. That is how they learn regulation. It's also how they learn to cry for help. But what happens if you cry and cry for help enough times and no one comes? What do you think starts to occur? You stop crying for help. This is where the freeze aspect comes in of the parasympathetic, what's called the shutdown response of the vagus nerve. It's called high tone dorsal of the parasympathetic. I talk about that in the polyvagal video. The little one starts to basically numb out and stop being responsive to their own physiology. Make sense? And I saw someone mention chronic illness. This is one of the, we think, research is pretty solid, is the etiology, the foundation of chronic illness is this shutdown in the system. But under that shutdown is a shit ton of activation and fight flight energy that is in terror, is uncomfortable, is in distress, and it's shut down. So that kind of interaction, I'm going to assume, if I think about that little baby, probably is happening with other things as well. When they're hungry, when they're tired, are they being fed when they cry? Are they being picked up when they might have something that doesn't feel right? It's this lack of attunement that creates this little one to basically say to itself, not cognitively, but somatically, no one is there for me. The world is a dangerous place, and I think I'm going to die. I'm actually probably going to die. Now, that baby is not saying, this is, again, I really need to put this out there. They're not saying that in their brain, in their thinking. They're feeling it in their physiology. So that question that someone had, which was, how do we deal with somatic activation, fight, flight, tension? We have to learn how to listen to our physiology with these little things. So one of the basic practices I teach my folks is learning to follow our impulses, learning how to listen to our biological impulses. So are you someone that will be freezing cold in your home and you will neglect to put on a sweater or warm up by putting on some heat or putting on some socks? Or are you someone who overheats and you don't do anything to cool yourself off? Are you someone who knows you're hungry and starving and you feel your blood sugar crashing, but you ignore those signals because you're just really good at it and you don't give yourself the sustenance you need? Or the flip side, do you eat and you keep eating even though you're full, but you don't register that you're full? And then that leads to problems as well. When you're scared and you need help, I'll just say, when you need help with something, do you suffer and not ask? Because the history shows that when you were suffering and your needs were needing to be met, no one came. Were you left to cry yourself asleep at night? Many of us don't even know what happened because we don't remember that. But most of us, at least my generation, and probably anyone older than me, I'm 46 now. Many of us were left to cry ourselves to sleep in a crib in a dark room away from our parents. That in itself breeds the unsafety in the system. So wanted to give you that example because, again, I'm leaving out all the fancy words of attachment and attunement and disorganized attachment and all the things that all the experts use, because I want to just give you some of those examples. So another one, movement. So the reason I want to bring up movement and safety is because part of what I have figured out really works for teaching an adult who is unsafe how to get safety on board is that we need to have movement. So it's more than just learning how to sense the sensations. It's more than just following our impulses. Obviously, that is all part of it. Orienting, also part of it, but we have to bring in how we move and how we feel our movements. And even going so far as practicing awareness-based movement that is exploratory, that is not scripted like a yoga class. So let me explain. When a little one comes out, they can't walk, right? They have to learn how to roll and roll over and sit up and get onto all fours and crawl and then crouch and then stand. The process for a human person, a human, to get onto their 2 feet, depending on the size of the child's skull, it can be 8 months, it might even be 18 months. It depends on just the system, the biology's structure, etc. When you allow an infant to explore naturally, and of course you make sure it's safe around them from the floor, and you play with them, you talk to them, you engage with them, they learn how to walk on their own. Now, of course, there's some exceptions. If a child is born with severe spinal cord injury or some form of, let's say, cerebral palsy or a stroke or something where the neurology is off, then you might need to help. So I'm not talking about those kiddos that are living with those situations. But healthy baby, no problems. We actually know how to learn how to walk innately when we're given the right environment, circumstance, connection, and safety. I can tell you that most of us probably didn't get that. We were put in contraptions, we were put in jolly jumpers, we were put in walkers, we were held up by our hands, and our parents, overachiever parents, wanted us to walk fast, so they put us onto our feet way too soon, and before we had our own internal safety built through exploring the world with our bodies. Part of the work that I learned a long time ago is something called the Feldenkrais method. This is where this somatic, remember the title of this lecture is Safety, a Nervous System and Somatic Perspective. So this is where that somatic thing comes in, this movement thing comes in. We need to get back to exploring our bodies and our movements. Now, this is not something I can teach here, but it is part of my courses. It's also part of what you would do if you were to go to, say, a really, really trauma-informed and nervous system-informed yoga class, dance class, movement class, whatever it might be, where you're feeling your body and you're allowed to explore your body in a way that isn't structured. But I will say I'm biased. I believe that the Feldenkrais work is some of the best work for reteaching us as adults how to trust our bodies again and feel safe in our structure, really in our skeleton, but how that skeleton relates to the environment. There's a class that I used to teach. There are some recordings that are available for purchase called Up and Down. It's something that I co-teach with my colleague Elia Marak. We haven't done any live sessions in a while, but when we were teaching in person, it was astonishing to see how much healing took place by someone learning how to simply go from laying on their backs to rolling to the side, to coming up to sit, to coming up to all fours, to coming up to crouch, to coming up to standing, and then walking with a feeling of stability, but also dynamic posture. So some of you might not have been expecting this part of the lecture, but trust me when I say the somatic part of restoring safety is also going back to these primal infant developmental movements that are so subtle, but actually form big parts of our sensory motor nervous system and how we relate to the world, how we kinesthetically relate to the world. So I wanted to bring in the movement because it is actually not talked about very much in the trauma world. People might say, oh yeah, you got to exercise, you got to walk. This is different. This is not not exercise class. This is not going for your walk every night after dinner. This is structured movement where you are learning how to explore again. And what can often occur, you guys, is if you didn't get this when you were young, when you start to feel the body explore and connect with the ground in a very subtle and kind of delicious way, two things sometimes happen. One, a person will feel intense fear because it's possible that when they tried to explore these movements, they weren't allowed to because they were trapped in a crib, or they were trapped in some kind of contraption, or they were swaddled with wraps. This is a common thing that parents are doing right now. I don't know why they do it. If a child is not in distress, there's no need to swaddle them in cloths and keep them packaged up like a burrito, right? You want their limbs to move. So sometimes when we start to explore these movements, our system will go into activation. And in those moments, that's where understanding the theory here is really important, because at that moment you need to pause, you need to feel, you might need to sit up, you might need to bring in some of the orienting lessons that I teach in my programs and be like, I'm here, I'm safe, and I'm feeling this activation in my heart. And it is really terrifying. But now you might know that that activation is an old somatic memory from way back when. And I'm just speaking hypothetically too here, you guys. This is just one vignette, right? But that activation might be from something that has not anything to do with abuse or trauma, but it's just this misunderstanding of how humans need to learn how to move and walk and explore just like little baby animals do, right? Well, I hope nobody would, but you would never confine a kitten or a puppy to a device that doesn't allow them to move when they've just been born, right? They get to crawl over mama, they get to do all the things, they play, they scratch, right? And so we need that exploration because it's the movement that teaches us about our bodies. So I had to bring in movement. I want to get into one more piece. I'm going to go into the comments. So there's quite a few comments about, or I've seen a few, what if we feel unsafe in our bodies and it's sensations of fight and freeze? Do we allow ourselves to feel the fear of fear as well? Theoretically, yes, Sam. And this is where I'm biased, of course, but this is where it's really important to titrate and learn some of the basics of nervous system health, what orienting is, what resourcing is from a biological level, understand what's going on in your physiology, because sometimes, there's this thing in the meditation mindfulness world that says just sit and be with the pain, just sit and be with the fear, and it'll just pass through, it'll just wash through your body like a flood, right? But the problem is that if our capacity is low and we don't have the foundation yet to be with that flood of sensation, which is fear, and all the emotions are sensations, we can actually put ourselves into more survival stress, which can be more activation, or above that is the shutdown response. And so this is where there's no one size fits all for this. True story, a little while ago, I can't remember who it was, but someone, I think a student, was feeling this tension in their face. It was something about tension in the body, and they would feel it whenever they meditated. And for whatever reason, they forgot the part of the teaching that they had learned with me in SBSM, which is totally fine. We're not always going to get this perfectly the first round or the first go. But they had forgotten about what a procedural memory was. Now, again, this is a bit more advanced, but a procedural memory is something that we store in our system that is survival-based, that is movement-based, that is something like the ball is going to come and hit me on the head, and I'm I'm going to protect my head from the ball hitting me on my head. I see it and I do a procedure to protect, right? So what this person was realizing was that what they were feeling, this tension, it had to do, I think, with their parent striking them repetitively as a child, I think. Doesn't matter, right? They're being hit. It's not good. It's abuse. And the child wants to fight and wants to say, piss off, but they either can't or they don't know how. And so as an adult, this person was feeling these sensations. And for whatever reason, they forgot to go into the procedure of protection. And when they did that, it unleashed the activation that was in the system that was keeping them in this state of dysregulation, and we could say unsafety. And so when they went into that movement, and I think they might have screamed no or stop or whatever, that hit them into that threshold so that the nervous system could find its reset and come down the other side. So this is where it's so important to know that we need to listen to what our body needs, but we also have to understand these little tinkering pieces of things like procedural memory, things like the activation, things like, whoa, I'm feeling a little lightheaded. I think I'm going into a shutdown response. I better stand up and get some fresh air or move a little bit or connect with something that I know is good for me, right? Because we've gotten into this world of, I'm meditating now, so I have to stay totally still. But if our system is running a survival response construct that is real, and it keeps popping up this tension on the face, and we keep just waiting for the tension to just pass through us and just leave, it ain't going to leave if it is actually based in a procedure that's written at that autonomic nervous system, sensory motor level that wants to protect, that wants to push away or scream at our parent and say, stop that, it hurts, right? So I get excited with that stuff. But the reason I say that story is it's super important to understand that this isn't just a one thing, right? Again, if you've been around with me for a while, you know that this work is very holographic and that it's three-dimensional, and it's not just a set of instructions that you follow. It's like learning a second language as an adult. You're having to learn structure and vocab and how you pronunciate things and how you write things and how you see things, how you feel the words, how they're different based on different circumstances. So at the outset, it feels like there's a lot and it's overwhelming and it doesn't make sense. But with time, with practice, and with more education, a lot of these things start to fall into place. I really want to share one more example. Give me a second, guys. So we covered the temperature thing, right? And how we can learn to bring more regulation to our system. We talked about the importance of movement. I was going to get into healthy aggression and anger, but I'm not. Go look up my live streams and my videos and articles on the importance of healthy aggression. Because again, if we were not fostered into an environment where we could express our healthy aggression and our life force energy, and it was squashed because our parents didn't know what to do with it, or they didn't have that in their own system, that also creates unsafety in our system. Okay. Here's the other vignette I wanted to share, and then I'll get to the question that was at the top. Sumaya asks, I missed out on the crawling phase as a baby. I went straight into walking as an adult. I hold the fear of falling. Will exploring movement assist with that? What do you think? Of course. That's why I've been saying we have to learn how to explore this stuff as an adult. But you're right. There is a lot of people have intense fear of heights, intense fear of standing on like vistas, intense fear of all sorts of things that involves their body. And they think it's some crazy phobia. And what it is lack of agency in the body to know that it can react, right? To know that it can balance. But the thing is if you didn't get those balancing strength, supple cues, and you're not keeping your body fit and strong as an adult, then yes, a person is going to be more terrified to go close to that ledge because they know if a big wind hits them, they're not going to be able to counteract that wind, for example. So yes, yes, yes. Okay. Okay, I wanted to just give another vignette. So this goes into part, remember I said at the very beginning, part of restoring safety as an adult when we know we've had abusive stuff happen in the past and we're in an environment that that is safe now, relatively speaking, meaning bombs aren't coming off, from the air. There's food in the fridge, there's electricity, there's heat, these things. So we have all those things. We need to learn how to get better at listening to our internal physiology. This is called our interoception. It's a fancy word, but basically it means the perception of our internal environment, what's going on inside. If we didn't have that positive, attuned, caring, parental caregiver figure that acknowledged what was happening in our bodies, we start to lose clarity and focus and finesse as to what's happening in our own bodies as adults. And adults right now in the Western world are masters at overriding their physiology. We can push and push and push to the point where we don't even realize we have cancer, or we don't even realize we are sick with something, because we're just so driven with our brain and our behavior. And so if you think about this, imagine you came up to me and you said, Irene, so I'm kind of using this as an example for like children, but we have this too as adults. If I was to say, you were to say to me, Irene, my stomach doesn't feel very well. Something doesn't feel right in there, right? That's your perception internally. So in that moment, I might say, okay, that doesn't sound too pleasant. Can you show me where? Like where? Here, is it here? Is it there? Right? So that's engaging with that fact that you said to me, my stomach doesn't feel very well. So that's what I would say. Like if someone came up to me or a child, I might say, oh, I wouldn't even say that's too bad, because there's nothing bad about it. It's just that's their reality. So I chose these words very carefully. Okay, that doesn't sound too pleasant. Can you show me where? That then engages you, the person with the tummy feels that don't feel good, to connect back to your tummy, your stomach, your belly, whatever it is. As opposed to, now imagine this. Let's say you come up to me and you say, Irene, my stomach doesn't feel very well. And I say, oh, I'm sure you'll be fine. It's not that bad. Can't be that bad, right? You're not dying and throwing up. You're fine. Go to school, right? So that's one scenario that I thought of. The other just might be stone cold, not even realizing that you said that to me, because I'm so dissociated in my own body that I didn't even just register what you, my child or partner or whatever said, right? So if we think of a baby, go back to that baby that was overheating in the drugstore, a child might be crying a cry of, I have distress in my body. Maybe I have a fever, maybe I have a bug, maybe I have a stomach something, maybe I have gas. And if the parent is so distuned, is not attuned to their infant's cries, they won't even hear that cry. And that cry is the cry of, my tummy doesn't feel well. And it can just get ignored, right? And then that's where that little infant will do all it can to go into another level of survival response, to not feel that pain. This is the third example of what not to do. So again, you come up to me and you say, Irene, my stomach doesn't feel very well. And I go, oh my God, oh shit. Okay, How bad is it? Oh, okay, maybe we should call the ambulance. Or did you eat something? What's in your mouth? What happened? Right? I'm acting there, guys, right? But this also occurs. Child doesn't feel very well. If the parent has their own troubles with their own body and they're living in fear, they might go crazy in their response. And then that amps that child's perception of what's wrong when maybe they just have a little bit of gas, or maybe they're a little constipated, or maybe they did eat something not well, or maybe they have the beginnings of a stomach bug, right? We just don't know. But I go back to this. So this is my way of teaching you guys what interoception is, which when we aren't attuned to it, and when we're expressing it to maybe our caregiver and they don't acknowledge it, that messes up with our sense of self, our internal physiology. And that, my friends, starts the path of not feeling safe in our bodies and not feeling safe to tell someone about what's happening in our bodies. So again, the first one, which I will say is probably, again, you have to finesse it depending on the situation, right? That doesn't sound too pleasant. Show me where it is. And if it's a child, often they know what they need, and we have to help them figure that out, right? With an infant, it's different. But again, the sounds are different with infants, whether it's a cry of that, a cry of something else. So part of your job, if you know that you were brought up with unsafety and you're trying to figure this stuff out, is you have to start acknowledging your internal physiology and not brushing over it like it's no big deal. But you also don't want to bring more fear to it. So in other words, you might feel the fear in your belly, you might feel the fear and the tension in your heart, but the goal is to be able to notice it and have awareness with it without adding more survival stress to the equation. All right, let me get to some questions here that came through earlier. Hope that little example makes sense. Just a second, guys. Okay, the other thing, and then I'll get into the questions. Promise. The question that you might be having, which I'm going to answer, is, so what do we do? How do we start working with this? So I've already given you some little pieces that are they seem really basic and simple, but the biology actually wants that. It wants to go back to those early experiences where it didn't have our primary needs met. And so if you can start to listen to these little things in your physiology, it's one way to start. The other thing is to start with the orienting practices. Again, if you can come to drop-in class on Saturday, if you can't make it live, you can get the recording. Just some of the basics of how to connect with the environment, but also connect to the body, the somatic experience. Find intention. We're going to play with intention, which is very different than attention. And intention is part of the magic that we use to reprogram how our movements happen. So when I talked about movement, that's where that comes in. So learning how to orient, learning how to track sensation, learning what resourcing is, positive resources. I'm pretty sure I did a video on resources a little while back, but that's like, what are the things in your life that you know help you calm down? Now, there's nothing wrong with a strategy, a coping strategy, a management strategy, all these things that we know, like, I don't have a hot cup of tea with me, but some people love the feeling of the heat and the fumes of the peppermint or the essential oil, or reading a book, or putting on some music, or your pet, or being in nature, or being in a bath, or watching a funny show. There's nothing wrong with Netflix as long as you're using it intentionally to unwind and have a good laugh every now and again, right? So resources can help us, but we're using them so that we can gain capacity to feel the unresolved survival stress that didn't get to process because we didn't have a caretaker, a caregiver, a situation that allowed us to get stuff out of our system. And then the more advanced things, more specific Feldenkrais movements, those are in my programs, in my courses. The higher level with this, when you know that there was deep unsafety growing up, or maybe you were the kiddo that was born premature. You could have the most loving parents in the world that really did attune to you, but you were in an incubator for the first 6 years of your life with tubes coming out of your nose and in your heart. You were being jabbed left, right, and center. Or maybe you had a spinal cord tumor. One of my friend's kids had that, and you had 10 surgeries by the time you were 2 years old. That is going to produce a system that is not trusting of the world, right? And so let's just say there's all these things that somatically have told our body it's not safe out there. Orienting, resourcing, and just tracking impulse is not enough from my experience. This is where the work that I've learned with Kathy Kane really shines, and that is learning how to work with what I call the stress organs. So specifically the kidneys and the adrenal glands, the gut, the brain stem, and other parts of the body that I don't want to get into because it's very technical, but working with the joints of the body and something called the diaphragms of the body. There are these containers in our body that, not like real Tupperware containers, but they're these spaces that hold our emotion, that hold tension, that hold strain. This is where really good body work that is done gently with the lens of trauma and the nervous system on board. It's not enough just to go see a body worker who just rubs and manipulates and pushes the fascia. That's good for structural things. But if you want to do some body work with someone at this level, you have to have someone who's informed at this level, which is one of the reasons why I created these courses, because there's not many of us that are informed at this level. But working at the level of these stress organs, so again, the kidney, adrenals, the brain stem, the gut, and these parts of the body, is done in a way that teaches the system through your own intention, not so much you're safe, but I'm here. I'm here. We're going to hang out and we're going to feel the terror in the kidneys, the fright in the belly, the tension in the brain stem, just the way you would if you had an infant or a child that was afraid. You not necessarily are going to say, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe. You're just going to hold them and say, there, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. So part of the work at this stress organ level isn't to force safety on the system, but is to connect with the system in a way that's saying, I'm here, we're here. Yes, it was really scary back then. Yes, you thought you were going to die. Yes, that is actually accurate. And following maybe the activation that's in that, or also helping the person soothe. This is where even, weighted blankets can come in, containment lessons. I have done some other videos on working with the stress organs, so Diana can pop those up. But very, very important to understand that this deeper level is like the holy grail of working with safety, and getting into that cellular nervous system level at the tissue level, because it's those adrenals, it's that gut, it's that brainstem, and it's all the fascia in the body and all those things that doesn't know that you're in a comfortable house with full heat and running water and food in the fridge and money in the bank. They don't know that. They only remember the old history of terror and fright. And so we have to get into that level. And then the final thing I'll say on working with the kidneys and these stress organs is that it takes time to lay down that foundation, just like it takes time to teach a child self-regulation. It doesn't happen in the first month. It doesn't happen in the first 6 months, but each day that you are with that little infant, you are layering another layer of attunement. You're laying another layer of connection. You're layering another layer of navigating an intense feeling being met and then coming out of it. So all these little, if you think about stars, it's like each little experience is a little star that makes up a constellation, that makes up the galaxy, and then the multiverse of all the stars that are out there, right? And so part of this work is building these layers in all these little ways. Okay. All right, I'm going to get to this question that I wanted to get to. Maybe I've already answered it. Let's see. I endeavor to finish in the next 10 minutes. I know we've gone a little over the hour. Penny's question way above was, I do not remember ever feeling safe to my core. This is why I'm here today. How do you develop feeling safe? I haven't been able to move forward with EMDR due to the inability to feel safe internally. Right. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization. I can never say it. It's working with the eyes. It's working with the central nervous system. The eyes are part of our brain. From my experience, EMDR ain't the best for early trauma. Even Bessel van der Kolk says that in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. It really seems to be better reserved for specific shock traumas wherein the person already had solid regulation before. But it's being used, in my opinion, a little too liberally for folks who have complex PTSD and these more chronic conditions. The people that I know that have tried it with no success have found that it makes them override. So they'll go into a session and the process of the movement and the session, the therapeutics, is what am I trying to say? It outweighs the person's personal internal experience. So there's nothing wrong with it in the right context. But the trouble is that if you go in and your system is already not in a window of tolerance, it's revved to the max with survival stress. Either you're completely in a sense of a functional freeze, and under that is lots and lots of survival stress. You're basically, I can't think of an analogy right now, but you're basically trying to do something to a system that first needs to learn how to just be a little less on guard. And so you're adding a really big stimulus to an already stimulated but maybe shut down system. And so the key thing here, Penny, is you said, I don't have this internal feeling of safety. You already know then that your level of safety is quite high, your level of unsafety is quite high. So everything I've been talking about getting better at listening to your biology, get better at connecting with your environment, all these things, working at this kidney, adrenal, brainstem, gut level, getting into these really basic, subtle practices of just touch and even naming, what does this unsafety feel like? Is it terror? Is it grief? Is it no one's there? What is it, right? And so that also lends into, someone just asked about acupuncture here. Could it help the organs feel safe? Again, it depends. A lot of these methodologies are assuming that the person knows how to track what's going on inside and knows when to say stop when it's too much. But what happens is most of us go into these sessions, we lay there because we want to get healed, and we let the person do whatever it is that they're doing. And of course, they're not being abusive by any means, but we don't have the knowledge internally to even sense that, oh my gosh, this is too much. You need to take that needle out right now. Or no, I don't want to sit here and stare into my partner's eyes and try to connect. Like that is way too intense, because let's say maybe attachment was ruptured when you were young, and the last thing you want to do is look into someone's eyes. You might need to actually turn your back to that person and just hear their voice there and not look in their eyes, right? So there's all these things that we have to understand in my opinion, before we go into these other practices. But I've also found that a lot of the times we don't need a lot of these other ones, a lot of these other techniques, when we know how to listen to our system and we start to kind of become our own medicine. Yeah, someone said, agree with you about EMDR. It was pleasant, but didn't impact my early trauma. I have not seen many successful cases of EMDR working with early trauma. Okay, I'm going to get to this final question, then I'm going to go into the comments. Yes, Jessica asked, could you speak about the level of safety and capacity to leave an unsafe environment, which may be unsafe, but it's what your system knows, without having your system dysregulate again? Okay. Well, to go straight to the point, if your system is dysregulated, it's dysregulated. Yes, you can make it worse by putting more strain onto the system, and then someone might end up with an autoimmune condition, a chronic illness, more of what's already dysregulated. But I think number one is recognizing that, yeah, the unsafe environment is what I know. It's how I've been wired. It is exactly how I know how to live. I know how to stay on guard. I know how to shut people out. I know how to not ask for help, all these sorts of things. I know how to, maybe someone mentioned fawn. I know how to fawn in the face of this abuse so that I stay safe. And so I think having that knowledge on board is really important. But then we want to start to rewire the patterns. And it depends on the situation, right? It's not useful to set a boundary with someone who's in your environment that is abusive if that boundary means you're going to get more hurt and more harm dosed out onto you, right? And so you have to win, and you have to pick your battles carefully. You have to decide, speaking up to this abusive parent isn't going to do me any good. But when I go out into the world and the barista makes the wrong coffee for me, I speak up. I say, hey, I can't drink that. I'm allergic. I need you to redo this. Right. And not in a way that's mean, but it's like, excuse me, I actually ordered this. Or even at the grocery stores, you're looking for something and you're frustrated because you can't find the thing you're looking for, and you know someone is there that could help, and you're refusing to ask for help because your history is, I have to do it all by myself because no one is here to help me. In those moments, that is how you can start to rewire some of the patterns. Like, oh, there's a gentleman right there in the produce section. I'm going to ask him where the saran wrap is, right? Can you help me find this, please? I have never met anybody in a grocery store who doesn't want to help you because they're usually looking to engage with someone, right? So these are some of the ways, Jessica, that you can start to rewire outside of your environment and watch the patterns that you have in the environment play out on the outside, and you start to shift them. So you got to get creative with that. And then also some of the basic practices that I offer, get into some of my resources, my audio samplers. Can you do a drop-in class? Can you start with the 21-day nervous system tune-up? And do the course in your own time. I often say, don't tell the people in your environment if you know that they're not interested in this work. Don't tell them about it. Don't force it down their throats. Don't try to get them to heal their traumas. Don't do that. Do it for you. Notice what you're noticing as you do these things in your own time. If it means you have to go into your car or lock yourself in the bathroom to read an article or do a lesson, then so be it. But one of the things we definitely don't want to do when we are trying to heal in an abusive environment, is to try to get our toxic people into the same boat that we are in. Not good, because they might just keep trying to sink it and put holes into it. Oh, I love this, Kathleen. What a great comment. She said, this might sound strange, but I've rewired through asking my housekeepers to clean in a way that we want. I used to be afraid to even ask, given my past history of trauma. That's great. The other thing, if you look at my video I did with my husband Seth a couple of weeks ago, where we talk about the difference between healthy shame and toxic shame, that is a very important one for those of you that were brought up in toxic environments, because he talks about how it was very hard for him to teach his son anything that revolved around taking care of his room, cleaning up the kitchen, taking the garbage out. My husband would go into a panic attack and terror just to ask his child to do a very basic thing. And it wasn't because he didn't want to, it was because his own childhood was so screwed up where it was really abusive. And so he didn't want to put any discomfort into his son's system. So it's a good one to watch if you haven't already. All right, we're going to wrap up real soon, guys, because we could go for hours with different examples and different vignettes and different stories. Someone writes a bit above, it's hard to do. I'm not sure what you were talking about, but you said it's hard to do that when you have illnesses like multiple sclerosis. Physical symptoms become signals of danger and you are always scanning your body. It is hard when the body becomes a source of unsafety. This is accurate. And that is, Christina, where it is really important to learn how to, the technical word in the SE world, the technical word in the SE world, somatic experiencing world, is to pendulate. So it's not about distracting the system, but it's about shifting the focus to something that is less painful. And that might be something on the body, something as simple as the fingers, or maybe it's the nose or feeling the ears, anything, or it could be shifting the focus to something external. So this is where resourcing and orienting can really come in handy. Because yeah, for some folks, like you said, with MS, spinal cord injury, I've worked with people who've recovered from serious burns. Sometimes the sensations are so sensitized that it's very hard to shift out of them. But I also know, in working with a lot of people with these oversensitized systems and a lot of physical pain, that we can shift some of this by focusing our attention into other areas, and to work with the area that is in tension and in pain and bring as much flow and as much resiliency to it. A lot of the times when there's parts of the body, if I'm thinking about someone with, say, a spinal cord injury or something really severe physically and structurally, a lot of the pain is because that tissue hasn't been manipulated, it hasn't been worked with. It's very, very tight, and it's very, very bound with scar tissue. I know that's different with MS, but I'm just giving out some examples. And with that, there's no oxygen, there's no blood, and then the waste products can't come in and out of that tissue. And so that's where softening the tissue, doing things that can help alleviate some of those tensions is really, really, really important. All right. I'm going to end today, I think now. We can keep going, but I'm going to end. So just quick review. Safety. So this idea of safety at the nervous system and somatic level, it is a very large topic. I chose today to go into these different avenues of examples so that you can see how this threads back to the past history of ourselves often, right? Often it's something that's occurred really, really young, even in utero, where we are not cognitively online and we're feeling everything somatically in the body, but also we're sensing the environment in a way that is heightened and riddled with fear and uncertainty, and I can't trust anything outside of there, so I'm just going to stay in here. And it sometimes can be vice versa. There's so much unsafety in my body that I'm going to disconnect from my body, and I'm just going to live out there, or in a cloud, or in spiritual bypass, right? Which is a common thing that happens. But the key to this healing this stuff is recognizing that we have to bring all these pieces together. So how we sense our internal environment, that interoception, how we sense our external environment, we could call that exteroception, that orienting, but how they relate to each other, and then how we can start to get better at listening to our internal environment and offering it what it needs, because very likely it didn't get what it needed when we were young. And then how can we start to get into our body, into our movement, getting more certainty and more security and resilience in our movement and how we utilize our limbs and our system, going back to the Feldenkraisian elements of learning how to crawl again, learning how to roll over again, learning how to just feel our bodies again. And it takes time, right? This stuff takes time. But the beauty when we go at this deeper level and we make the commitment to work at this deeper level is that the layers really do build. They build exactly in the same way that they build when an infant is with a healthy human and that human is giving that infant care, connection, bonding, love, attuning to its needs, offering it what it needs, and being with that little one as it goes through these roller coasters of sensation and emotion and learning how to be with their own physiology. So we're essentially trying to reteach ourselves these things, or for many of us, teach ourselves these things for the first time. All right, just a reminder that drop-in class is on Saturday, the 20th, which is 2 days from now, 12 o'clock Pacific, an hour-long class. It's $19 on Zoom. We basically hang out for an hour, very little theory, mostly practical. Obviously, recording sent to you if you can't make it there live. My website has so much stuff on it. Resources, downloads, audio downloads. If you can't commit right now to paying anything, that's fine. All that stuff is there on my site. And then final note, the best place to start if you really want to get deeper into this is the 21-day nervous system tune-up course. And little reminder, little note that that course is going to go on sale on the 29th of this month, which is a Monday. So not this Monday, but the next Monday. We do this Cyber Monday sale once a year. So for only 24 hours, you can get that self-study starter course for just under $200. It's regular, just under $300. All right. Thank you for everyone for being here and for hanging around for an hour and 37 minutes. If you caught this late, not to worry. This will pop up and be live on my channel. And just keep listening, keep noticing, keep connecting. We can restore safety. I've seen it. My husband experienced this. It took time, obviously. It took practice. But when we get the safety on board, the biology, our organ systems, our ability to connect, our ability to think, our ability to know what we need to do and what we don't want to do, what we want for us and what we don't want for us, it gets way more clearer. It gets clearer. All right, everyone. Signing off. Bye for now. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Diana, for all the links.